Beneath the world you know, there's another. A black market with no borders, where weapons, secrets, and people are sold to the highest bidder. It's not just a marketplace, it's a machine, powered by fear, protected by governments, and invisible to the world. They took the wrong girl, and now her brother is coming to burn it all down. Chris moved through life as a ghost, quiet, measured, and just out of reach. At 29, the ex-soldier had traded battlefields for construction sites, welding steel under the Florida sun by day, and returning home to a modest apartment where he spent most of his time caring for his younger sister, Lena, as a father. For all his silence, Lena was his opposite. Bright, sharp-tongued, always questioning everything. A journalism major in her final year at the university. She chased the truth with a reckless fire that worried Chris more than he admitted. That night, Chris had returned from his shift, sweat and sawdust still clinging to his skin. The voicemail buzzed in as he set down his keys. The moment he heard her voice, his world changed. Lena's breath hitched with panic. "Chris, something's wrong. I think they..." Then a scream, a thud, silence. The phone slipped from his hands. He was in her apartment within minutes, every muscle tensed. The door was ajar, its lock twisted and useless. The place looked ransacked, papers scattered, her laptop missing, one of her sneakers lying under the overturned coffee table. Chris moved with clinical precision, eyes scanning, heart pounding. Then he saw it. A press badge wedged between her desk, bent and smudged. The name, Lena Hawthorne, still legible beneath the jagged scrawl carved into the plastic. QUNON. His breath caught. He didn't know what QUNON was, but the name pulsed with threat. He pocketed the badge and reached for his phone. The call to 911 was short, but what followed left him colder than the silence Lena had left behind. 15 minutes later, it wasn't local police that had arrived. It was the FBI. 2 black SUVs, 4 agents in dark suits with polished shoes and empty eyes. They cordoned off the area with speed that didn't make sense. When Chris pressed them for answers, their tone was flat. "Let us handle this," the lead agent said, flashing credentials too quickly. "But she's my sister," Chris argued, the soldier in him rising. "You're saying nothing. We have it under control." He didn't buy it. Something about their presence felt rehearsed, like they were expecting this. He watched as they moved through the apartment, not looking, but collecting. A laptop bag, Lena's journal, her flash drives. Then they left without so much as a follow-up. Later that night, Chris returned alone. The building security office was locked tight, but he found a way back in. When he finally accessed the footage from the hallway outside Lena's door, every second of that evening had been wiped. Not corrupted, erased. Back in the alley behind the building, Chris lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. That's when he saw it, a black SUV idling across the street, engine humming. A figure inside, watching. Chris approached, his posture low, tactical. A predator reawakened. But before he reached the curb, the SUV peeled off into the night, tires screeching. Chris stood frozen under the flickering street light, Lena's press badge clenched in his hand. Something was deeply, dangerously wrong, and Lena's disappearance wasn't random. It was a message, and he had just received it. The sun hadn't risen in days, not in Chris's world. Since Lena's disappearance, time was a haze of movement, research, and silent fury. He hadn't slept. Not really. On Lena's bulletin board, buried beneath post-its and ink-scarred notebooks, was a scribbled name, Reedman Holdings. It didn't appear on her articles, but it was underlined twice in red. Chris traced it through late-night databases and foreign businesses until it surfaced in the Cayman Islands as a shell company. On paper, it handled international logistics. In reality, it was a front, connected to private security firms and offshore accounts used by known black marketers. And QUNON. Chris contacted an old friend from the army, George Delgado, a logistics specialist who now worked in less than legal circles. With enough coaxing and a fabricated identity as a rogue mercenary named Kay Lauren, Chris secured an invitation to a private auction in the Nevada desert. The location came through encrypted messages and burner phones, a converted missile silo, repurposed into a fortress beneath the earth. Dressed in tactical gear, Chris boarded a private transport from Phoenix. The others in the convoy were monsters in tailored suits, arms dealers, corporate vultures, warlords from failed states. No names, only whispered reputations. Inside the silo, the auction room was drenched in opulence. Velvet curtains, champagne, and neon light bouncing off polished steel. Guards patrolled the perimeter, each armed to the teeth. But it wasn't the wealth that made Chris's stomach knot. It was what was being sold. On display, prototype weapons, hard drives with state secrets, even a captive hacker known for breaking into Interpol servers. But it was the final category, live assets, that chilled him. Behind the bulletproof glass panel, prisoners were paraded silently. Chris scanned each face, heartbeat pounding. No Lena, but her photo, tagged asset number 473, was on the screen of one of QUNON's broker's tablet, scheduled for auction in 48 hours. Chris moved like a ghost through the shadows, planning taps in the server room, listening in on encrypted channels. A whisper of panic surfaced. One broker mentioned asset 473's high-profile heat and the need to fast-track her sale. Someone wanted her silenced. He followed the broker to a maintenance wing and ambushed him between flickering lights. The man screamed, gurgling threats until Chris pressed a blade to his throat. "Who's protecting you?" Chris growled. The broker laughed through the blood in his teeth. "You think this ends at the FBI? You're not even close. QUNON is the system now." "What do you mean?" But the man choked on the last word, spitting blood before collapsing. Chris stood, jaw clenched, every muscle tensed. He now knew Lena's time was running out, and the rot ran deeper than he imagined. It wasn't just about QUNON or a rogue operation. The system that trained him, the country he swore to defend, was protecting the very people selling his sister, and he was going to burn it all down to get her back. Chris had done raids before, compound sweeps in hostile territories, rescue missions under moonless skies, but nothing like this, nothing where the stakes were so personal. The underground auction was a fortress of concrete, steel, and silence hidden beneath the Nevada sands, but Chris had spent days mapping its layout, memorizing guard patterns, planting timed explosives in the ventilation systems. It was surgical, tactical, unforgiving. He entered the storage compound just after midnight, the dead zone between shifts. Silencers hissed with each shot, bodies dropping at the shadow before alarms could blare. By the time the facility realized it was under siege, Chris was already past the first checkpoint, blood splattered on his gear, his breath steady. Down a corridor labeled live holdings, he found her. Lena was chained to a bench, wrists raw, lips cracked, but her eyes still burning, even bruised and bloody. Her defiance hadn't dimmed. When she saw him, her shoulders sagged, not in weakness, but in relief. "Took you long enough," she rasped, her voice hoarse. Chris broke the restraints with a crowbar. She collapsed into his arms for just a moment, long enough to whisper, "We need the drive. It's everything." Through smoke and flashing sirens, they moved. Chris carried her when she faltered, one arm firing rounds while the other gripped her tight. The server room was a furnace now, torched by panicked guards trying to destroy the evidence. But Lena led him to a backup vault, hidden beneath the auxiliary power bank. Inside, a single hard drive, marked only with a red tag. They escaped through an old maintenance shaft, crawling for what felt like miles before emerging into the cold desert night. A stolen Jeep roared to life, and they vanished into the dark. Hours later, in an abandoned safe house on the outskirts of Boulder City, Lena opened the drive. The files loaded slowly, but each one confirmed the nightmare. Arms deals masked as infrastructure projects, shipping manifests for human cargo, wire transfers routed through shell companies, and at the top of the chain, Vice President Thomas Grayson. Chris stared at the screen, fist clenched. He's second in command to the whole damn country. Lena nodded, fury gleaming in her tired eyes, and the one making QUNON untouchable. "I want to publish it, all of it," she said, standing despite the pain. "This ends now." But Chris stepped in front of her, calm but unyielding. "If we go to the public, we won't make it to sunrise. They'll bury us and rewrite history before breakfast." She shook her head. "So we stay silent?" "No," he said, voice low. "We plan, we strike, we make it count." Across the room, a dusty TV hummed with the morning news. There he was, Grayson, smiling for cameras at a charity gala, draped in a flag, shaking hands with war heroes. A perfect portrait of patriotism. Lena stared at the screen, her voice hollow. "He's a devil hiding in daylight." Chris didn't respond. He was already thinking about how to drag that devil into the light. 3 months, that's how long they stay ghosts. Chris and Lena move like the wind through the edges of America, switching cities, growing beards or cutting hair, stealing new names like clothes. Their world became motel rooms with peeling wallpaper, silent dinners eaten under the helm of fluorescence, and cold maps spread across cracked desks. Lena became a master of encryption, uploading fragments of the hard drive to dead drop servers, masking their location with every breath. Chris wore contacts in secret, mapping out patterns of security details, flight paths, political fundraisers, everything pointed to one moment. The president will be attending a high-profile humanitarian banquet in Washington, D.C. A closed-door gala with only top donors, foreign dignitaries, and hand-picked staff. If there was ever a chance to get the drive to someone with real power, someone above Grayson, it was now. The only problem? The event was a fortress. Layers of clearance, walls of surveillance, secret service agents like wolves in designer suits. Chris didn't flinch. Posing as a temporary catering hire, he forged credentials and slipped into the kitchen crew through a network of favors owed and bribes paid. Lena, from a borrowed surveillance van 3 blocks away, watched the blueprints through hacked feeds. Her voice buzzed in his earpiece. "You're in. East Corridor is your best bet. Service crew with voice cams." The gala unfolded with the sterile gloss of high society pomp. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter filled the air. The president sat at the center table, surrounded by the same men and women whose names littered the hard drive. Except one of them had no idea. Chris moved through the room, balancing a silver tray, sweat clinging to the collar of his crisp white shirt. Every second stretched, every step threatened discovery. Then, there he was. The president leaned back, chatting with the senator about defense contracts. Chris approached wine, his fingers wrapped around the base of a hidden case beneath the napkin. The device was tiny, shielded and encoded to deliver one message: trust no one but this data. He leaned in as he refilled the president's glass, slipping the case into the fold of the man's dinner napkin. The president barely looked up, but Chris saw the flicker. He noticed. "Now," Lena whispered in his ear, voice shaking. Chris walked away. 30 seconds later, 2 Secret Service agents turned sharply, scanning the crowd. One's hand hovered near his earpiece. Chris had already vanished. By morning, the nation woke to chaos. The broadcast came unannounced, cutting into every major network. The president stood at a podium, stone-faced, the White House seal behind him. "We have uncovered a network of corruption," he said. "A whistleblower has revealed evidence implicating members of this very government in crimes against humanity." Vice President Grayson was among the arrested. So were several intelligence heads and defense contractors. No names were given for the source, only gratitude. Chris and Lena watched from a remote cabin in the Rockies, cloaked in mist and silence. On screen, the nation cheered. Chris turned to Lena, who smiled faintly. "You did it." "No," he said quietly. "We did it." The mountain air was crisp, biting in the early morning. A soft wind moved through the pine trees, carrying the scent of snow and cedar into the valley below. In the weeks since the broadcast, Chris and Lena had stayed quiet, tucked away in the weather cabin, nestled deep in the Rockies. No phone lines, no internet, just peace. For the first time in months, they didn't look over their shoulders. They spent their days chopping wood, fishing in the nearby stream, and pretending, if only for brief moments, that everything was normal. That Lena hadn't been nearly sold to the highest bidder. That Chris hadn't infiltrated one of the most dangerous organizations in the world. That the world hadn't been moments from slipping into chaos under the control of a shadow government. The quiet was earned and fleeting. One morning, just as the first light crept across the mountaintops, the distant hum of engines stirred the silence. Chris was sharpening a knife on the porch when he froze, eyes narrowing. The convoy, 3 main black SUVs followed by a helicopter, wound its way up the dirt road to the cabin. Lena stepped out, wrapped in a flannel blanket, her face still groggy from sleep. The look Chris gave her was calm, but she could see the readiness behind it, an instinct that never left. The vehicles rolled to a halt, engines cutting at once. The cabin door creaked on its hinges as Chris stepped forward, cautious but steady. From the lead SUV, a figure emerged. The president. There was no cameras, no press, just him, dressed in a dark coat and flanked by 2 agents who hung back respectfully. "I had to see it for myself," the president said, extending a hand. "The man who stopped the storm before it broke." Chris hesitated and shook it. "Didn't do it alone. I know, the president said, glancing toward Lena, which is why I wanted to offer you something. Not a thank you, a job. Chris didn't speak, so the president continued. There's more out there. QUNON was a hydra. You cut off the head, but the body's still moving. I want you in our elite task division, off the books, hunting the shadows, protecting the people who never know your name. Chris looked back at Lena. She gave him a tired, knowing smile. We've done good, she said quietly, but there's more for you to do. Chris turned to the president. If it means protecting people like her, I'm in. The president nodded. And let's get to work. As Chris climbed into the chopper, the sun peeked over the ridge, flooding the valley with golden light. Lena stood on the porch, watching the blade spin, her blanket flapping gently in the wind. The dawn warmed her skin. For the first time in what felt like forever, it didn't feel like the beginning of a war. It felt like the end of one. Even in the darkest systems, light can break through.